everyone. I hope you can see this book I'm holding up. I've been waiting for quite a long time to get this book, and actually it contains a lot of posters that I've wanted to get for many years. Still haven't gotten them, but I figured it'd be nice to have a hardcover book that at least had them in there. So, as you can see, it has this nice sort of a fabric cover. It's a hardcover, and but it reminds me of books that were bound in, I don't know, maybe the 1950s. I guess I remember seeing a lot of books that had this texture to them when I would visit my grandparents sometimes. I guess that was quite a long time ago. Anyway, I've always been really fascinated with racing and open wheel cars, and particularly Monaco, just because it's such a neat location. Obviously, having the racing around the harbor area is very interesting and has had a dangerous past. As you can see, it's been around quite a long time. Goes back as far as 1911, probably even before that. Anyway, this book starts off with some of the racing's history and other races that have inspired Monaco Grand Prix to exist in the first place. Look at that. That's Monaco. Probably a very old layout, but as you can see, the number 1 starts over here. This is where the start-finish straight would be. So, runs right through the narrow streets in Monaco. So you would come very fast along this straight, make a really sharp turn here at Saint-Devote, climb up the hill, up Beau Rivage, and as you come up over this hill, it's a blind crest, and then you have a long double left-hander as you come through into mainly the casino complex over here. I'm not sure it was the casino back then. Yes, it was. Number 9, this area here is the casino. So you come racing around this corner, and then you have to make a really quick change of direction to turn right. Then you come down this hill, and there's a road that comes across, so you would always have to swerve out around kind of where the road is. That's that. And then you would come downhill, braking downhill, and have to make a really tight right-hand turn again. And then here you come down the hill into a really difficult section, which is the hairpin. Very slow, and most cars have to fit special steering racks to make that corner because it's so tight. So you come around this corner, and you wrap around these buildings here, and then you come out and around here. You're right on the seawall, but the road comes back around here, and as you come through here, you kind of see a little bit of a tunnel right here. You're actually driving through the tunnel. In real life now, this is bigger, and the tunnel is quite scary. You come screaming out of the tunnel, go from darkness right back into daylight, and this is all downhill, very fast. Now they've actually put a really slow chicane here at the bottom, but actually at this point The chicane is much less severe. So you come here, you have to do a quick left-right, and then you come around this corner, 15, which is to back. And then as you come around here, again, this is before the track actually came around. This would now be the swimming pool. But I guess here it was just a straight. But this is one of the most exciting racing corners on the Formula One calendar these days, when you have to come through here and you make a quick left-right and then another right-left to come back around. So, and then you come through here down into what's now known as the Raskas, which is the restaurant. Actually, I guess it's on this map as well. And then you make a tight turnaround and you come back on to the straight. So, pretty neat drawing there from 1935. But the main reason I bought this book was for the posters in the 1930s, because I'm absolutely fascinated with Art Deco. And look at that. Those really cool posters. And they made a new one for each year that the race ran. As you can see, that's the one on the cover. Sorry about the glare. But I like that one. That one's really nice. Kind of lends itself to some brushing, so let's go ahead. I'm sure I have a JPEG of this somewhere on one of my computers. The 1933 poster coming out of the tunnel was one that I really wanted to get a full-size print of so I could put it on my wall. Look at that. It still has that same lettering. But back then, the drivers were really brave, because they were sitting in this cockpit and didn't even have a seatbelt usually. And granted, Monaco's not the fastest track, and most of the turns are pretty tight, so you never really get above, I don't know, maybe back then they were going 130, 140 miles an hour, 150 tops, I would imagine. But it was still pretty scary if they had a wreck or there was no retaining wall or anything on the track, so they very often ended up in the water if you crash in the wrong place. But these posters are just so beautiful. Look at that. There's another one that seen before. Kind of liked it. You can see how race cars back in the 1930s had fairly narrow wheels. Tires were really not very wide, as you can see. Very big circumference. And the other funny thing is they had camber. The wheels actually lean outward, which is not the way they do things today. Today the wheels actually, the top would lean inward because that gives more grip in corners. But back then, I guess, just for balance, maybe because the rear had more grip or something, and if you have less camber in the front, then that would balance the front end. So anyway, racing at high speeds is very much about balance. So how the car feels when cornering, and whether the front wheels give up the grip or the rear wheels give up first, and how to deal with that. This one's really interesting because look at that. I think this is the auto union, and this would have been about the time when they'd figured out that if you put the engine behind the driver instead of in the front, then you get a much better handling and balance. The car is easier to rotate in corners, much sportier. In fact, even today, you know, if you drive a Ferrari or a Lamborghini, most of the time the engine's in the back. But this was a concept that only lasted a short time in the 30s, and then was abandoned in Formula One racing, or Grand Prix racing as it was called back then. So you can see this car would have the engine in the front, this one's in the rear. But Mercedes and Auto Union, I believe, were both running cars with the engines behind the driver in the 30s. So when that idea was revived in the 50s, it was considered revolutionary, but it wasn't a new idea. Poster for the 1937 year. Now this is one I definitely have wanted to buy a print for. That was definitely, I love the layout here coming around the harbor. Just the way that the composition with the red car and the neat little palm leaves coming down. Very interesting. And unfortunately, World War II kind of stopped racing for about 11 years, 12 years, something like that. And there was no Monaco Grand Prix until 1948, which is when we end up with this poster here. Now you can kind of see it's still painted, but we're starting to lose the Art Deco look. It's becoming a little more, you know, straightforward, kind of like almost like a photograph. 1950. This one's interesting. I guess at some point the Grand Prix was more about sports cars and not really open wheel racers. It's a poster. Quite cool. Here we have the mid-50s. You're talking Maserati. It's kind of this interesting tub design. Wheels are a little bit different. They had drum brakes back then, instead of the nice disc brakes that you use now. There we go again. is still in the front at this point. The other thing I like about this book is the photographs, and you can see Sterling Moss right there. It's known as Sir Sterling Moss now. Good racer. Never quite became a world champion, although he was very close. But he won the Monaco Grand Prix at least once, maybe more than once. And he's just a very good driver, so another interesting layout. Nice zoom of the car. And this close up of the wheel, again with the drum brakes. Look at the cars in the 1960s. Getting a little more lightweight and streamlined, lower to the ground maybe. Really pretty. 1960s, late 60s, 1967. This would be the year when guys like Dan Gurney would be racing. Jim Clark. Really good drivers. Cars like the Lotus were pretty dominant back then. '70, that was when started to see wings appearing on the cars, on the nose, and also on the rear. Made them much faster in corners, of course. Also stabilizing braking zones. Here you kind of see we're getting away from the painted look and more photographic. This neat overlay of the car shape, grandstands. It's really pretty. 1973, I like this one. Car gets closer and closer. Here you have what looks like the Tyrrell of Jackie Stewart, maybe. Jackie Stewart won the Formula One championship in 1973, among other years. That was his third year. Emerson Fittipaldi in his Lotus. This very, very beautiful car. This car was featured in an episode of Top Gear where they go on a Spanish holiday that included its own racetrack, where the Stig took this car around for a lap. It just has an amazing engine sound, and it's just such a cool looking car. I think if I were to be able to drive any era of Formula One besides something recent, let's say 2004, which is the last technology peak, I would think. Most of the lap records were set in 2004. But I would love to go back and drive a car like this where you had no driver aids, no ABS. You shift with your right hand and not with paddle shifters on the steering wheel. Straight cut gears, you had to match revs on the downshift with your basically braking and revving the gas with your right foot at the same time. Done that in racing school. It's quite fun. 1976. Now we're looking at the Ferrari of Niki Lauda. Beautiful car. There's going to be a movie coming out, and it's going to be called Rush. It's directed by Ron Howard, actually, and it's all about the 1976 Grand Prix season, and particularly the rivalry between Niki Lauda and his Ferrari and James Hunt, who drove for McLaren. Anyway, I don't want to give away too much of the story, but it's a really dramatic, really glamorous year. But that was when F1 was still very dangerous. So that certainly comes into play for the story of Niki Lauda. It's almost tragic, but he manages to defy the odds, so to speak. 1978. This is when you started to have ground effects on the cars. Almost missed that technology. Here we go again, same kind of thing. Look at the sculpting on that body. You have the front wing, but then you have this body that traps all the air under the car. Basically, it creates the opposite of a plane's wing, so the effect is that the car is sucked to the ground. Pretty amazing. Plus these huge tires. I like this poster for 1982 as well. Almost looks like maybe the Williams or something that Nelson Piquet would have driven. And then, of course, you get to the Prost and Senna era. There was a 10-year period where nobody but these two guys won Monaco Grand Prix. They just sort of took turns, but mostly Senna came to dominate. He ended up winning it 6 times. Got kind of a cartoonish look on that one, 1986. Problem with the posters once the FIA got more heavily involved, and Formula One got much more commercial, so to speak. There's somewhat of a you can notice that the posters started to get a little bit like a template look. Very much the same from one year to the next. The Schumacher brothers, Ralph and, of course, Michael. You have the poster for 1994 showing Senna's car, but unfortunately, 94 was the year that Senna was killed while racing, and that was sort of the end of that era. It was very sad. But after that, you had the new champion of Michael Schumacher, starting with the 2 championships he won for Benetton. There's this car here. Eventually, he went over to Ferrari. So it took him a few years to get Ferrari to a point where they became a winning team. But as you can see, the posters kind of started to just feature red, lots of red. Here again, I don't know, for me the more recent posters are a little bit boring. But two of the youngest world champions ever in the sport, Hamilton and Alonso. This was the year that they were teammates, which didn't go so well. They finished the year with the exact same number of points, but just 1 point shy of actually winning the championship, which was kind of too bad. And then you have the last year that the poster started to actually have some interesting detail again. The actual car that was used, this might have been the year before. So you can see kind of the nice sculpture that the F1 cars used to be. This was sort of the last year that they looked like this. Now they've gotten much more square looking. This beautiful panorama shot. Let's see if I can get the whole thing in. That's just awesome. Shows the hairpin and the run around the park, casino, and the ocean out there. Quite amazing. Hope you enjoyed the video. I like videos that show books being opened and turning pages and so forth, so I hope you guys enjoyed this one.